Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sediko Rakolote, the founder and the trustee of Progressive Socio-Economic Investment Institute. It is a public benefit trust that was established to do public benefit activities. One of those activities includes hosting webinars discussing topical issues that affect society. Colleagues, the state-owned enterprises are a prominent feature across the globe. There are over 700 state-owned enterprises in South Africa. Historically, state-owned enterprises have played a central role, usually in sectors that are dominated by monopolies in electricity, water supply, and even transportation. What is the role of the state-owned enterprises in economic development in our country? Today, we'll be attempting to respond to that question, finding out what role can state-owned enterprises play in the economic development of our country. We are so fortunate today, colleagues, to have an engineer by profession within our midst. He completed his BSc Electrical Engineering degree from University of Cape Town. He further obtained an engineering honors in computer engineering from University of Pretoria. He has 2 master's degrees, one in business leadership from Unisa, and also masters of engineering from University of Pretoria. He was born in Pokwani village in Limpopo. He's trained former Eskom engineer, also a senior executive in the field of telecommunications. He's a former executive for both MTN and Vodacom. He was recently a chief technology officer at Air Traffic and Navigation Services. He is an entrepreneur and a philanthropist. Colleagues, allow me to welcome Phillip Boshielo as our presenter tonight. Over to you, Mr. Boshielo.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. What a good introduction, and I really appreciate the invite. One of the reasons why I suggested this topic is because, you know, when you look at the socio-economic conditions of South Africa, makes one wonders as to what are things that we can do as a country to make sure that we move this country forward. And my view is that SOEs are actually one of the best vehicles to move this country forward. Before I start with this conversation, I need to do a disclaimer. Disclaimer number one is that I'm not an economist, I'm an engineer by profession. So in other words, what I'm going to share with you here is not something that would have a backup empirical evidence from the economic perspective. I'm sharing to you as a person with the knowledge, especially after having worked for, you know, state-owned entities, which, you know, amongst others includes Eskom, DNL, and of course, HNS. And disclaimer number two, you know, this discussion is not for academic purposes. In other words, I don't want to be referenced somewhere. It's, as I said, it's an open discussion that will allow all of us to bring, you know, the thinking around what is really happening in our country. And then, of course, the last one is that, you know, everything that I'm going to say here, it shouldn't be seen as me putting a blame. If I say an entity has failed, I'm not saying it failed because of a certain government, because I don't want to be quoted saying that, you know, my conversation was about discrediting a certain government. That's not what this intention or the intention of this conversation is about. And I'm hoping that we are together on that one. Yeah, a very good topic, Ntate Rakolote, you know, the role of SOEs in terms of economic development. I think everyone would agree with me that a definition of economic development, you know, it talks about a country, amongst others, increasing its wealth and, of course, the standard of living. You can't say an economy is growing while the wealth and the wealth as measured per capita of the citizens of a country and, of course, the standard of living of those citizens are improved. And also, you know, others will say to you that a definition of economic development, it talks about the production of economic goods and services in a country, of course, is time-bound. In other words, you can't talk about economic development without having to refer to a certain year. You would say that a country has grown X percentage compared to a certain year. So that's how generally economists will define what is economic development. As a second point also that I need to put is that, you know, like any other concept, it has features. And of course, one of the features that you know literature has identified economic development is the issue of illiteracy rate. In other words, a country will be seen as becoming a developed country when a literacy rate increases. And of course, the infrastructure, you look at the countries like your UAE, which, in the past 10 to 20 years have literally grown. And you can see by the form of the infrastructure that indeed, the country has, literally, grow its economic side of things. And of course, the standard of living, and most importantly, the access to quality housing. And it, I mean, Africa is one of the, I would say, developing continents that you see new developments coming. And access to good quality healthcare. You cannot say your country is economically developing without having to have issues of healthcare taken care of. And lastly, from my list is the issue of academic level. The more you produce, which is of course linked to the literature rate, literacy rate, the more you produce academics is a sign that literally your country is moving towards a very great economic direction. The third point that I need to touch on is the issue of the policies around economic development. It. Each and every country has a certain policy around how they want to develop their economy. That's why even the political system, if you get into South Africa, you'll find that each and every political party has its own way or definition of policies that will be implemented if it gets into government. That also applies to all the governments in the world. For you to be able to have a certain trajectory in terms of how you want to grow your economy, it has to be based on the framework that you put, which it talks to the issues around the policies that you put behind your economic development strategy. And of course, among them is the issue of how do you deal with foreign investment, and of course, the issue of macroeconomic stability. Privatization versus the deregulation is one of the most talked about in the academic space. Effective tax collection, a country that is developed, generally you see it as how its tax collection mechanisms are put. I mean, in South Africa we have SARS, which is rated among the best in the world, because as you know, South Africa is one of the best financial frameworks, and which makes it to be a very classical example if you want to use it as a model of how developing countries are run. And I'm not in any way saying that South Africa is run perfectly or not perfectly. I think we all believe we all have a different theories in terms of issues that are happening in South Africa, and I don't think it's up to me to go into detail as to what are the issues around the South Africa. And of course, the investment in the public services. When a country grows and understands its role in terms of developing its country, there is no way that it will leave the public services behind. I mean, you will see in South Africa, we put a Gautrain as a part of our economic development, and during the World Cup, we put a lot of infrastructure, which included the roads and the stadia, as a part of our investment. And lastly, as a part of the policies, is the issue around industrialization. And our president, I mean, is a big fan of the issues around to industrialize South Africa. And I understand why it does that, because each and every industrialization has an investment arm into it. In other words, capital expenditure being put behind it, which we all know that for every capital expenditure you put in your country, it talks to a job creation. You cannot create a job by literally limiting your investment. Those are three points that are identified. The fourth one is the issue of the role of factors of production. I think people that studied economics, they will remember in their economics 101, where your lecturer gave you, 4 factors of production. Number one being the issue of land, which talks to the physical space and the issue of natural resources that comes with it. And of course, the capital, which talks about the money and the investment that comes along. And the third most important one is the issue of labor, which includes the workers that form the part of your input into your production system. And of course, lastly, the entrepreneurship. And those 4 factors of production are very, very key in terms of the topic that we're having today. I mean, the question that you need to ask yourself as a South African is that if you have an SOE, let's talk about Transnet as a typical example. The question that you need to ask yourself, out of all those 4 factors of production, what is it that Transnet is doing? The issue of Transnet utilization of land, the issue of Transnet utilization of the capital in terms of its liquidity, amongst others, and of course, how it absorbs the labor from the labor market, and the issue of promotion of entrepreneurship. I mean, we know it. in a state-owned entity like Transnet, there are opportunities that can be linked to, absorbing the entrepreneurs. I mean, if as an example, I mean, we know Transnet is a logistic company. You can actually think about how do you bring the entrepreneurs in that space. And then we know it, I mean, from, your economics 101 is that your factors of production are actually your input, and the government framework, government policies becomes your production system, and the output becomes the goods and services. Out of Transnet, the goods and services is the issue of logistics. Number 5, it's very important because it talks to the heart of the topic that we are having today of the SOCs. I'm titling it the use of SOCs as a catalyst towards the economic growth. As you know, you cannot talk economic development without mentioning the growth. In other words, if a country is not growing, in principle, in summary, it says economically we are not developing. So we need to understand that. And then of course, in terms of the AOC, we know historically, I don't know how much of you guys know, but the reason why in the history, I mean, many years ago, probably before some of us were born, is that the countries were using SOCs to enter into markets that entrepreneurs are not comfortable into getting into. One of the reasons why, I mean, you go into the US, you would find that, the rail, as an example, was dominated by government is because entrepreneurs, because of its high capital expenditure, because of its risk, they were avoiding to get into that. Governments were getting into those because, number 1, they knew that they are high capital intensive. Number 2, they knew that they are labor intensive. Number 3, they knew that they play a part in terms of growing the economy of that particular country, which is the reason why the SOCs were formed. And then we know, I mean, most countries, as we move forward, like the likes of your Germany, they moved away from the model of having 100% SOCs to, I mean, my studies have shown that in Germany, most, government's involvement is around 10-15%. You go to China, China goes to 90%. Obviously, depends on what type of government we're putting in place. So for you to understand the role of SOC or SOEs is to understand in the first place why the SOCs were formed. They were literally formed to make sure that the government participate in an environment that not an entrepreneur would want to participate. Let's talk about water and sanitation as an example. People that are in that space will tell you that because it's something that is linked to our livelihoods, therefore natural resources, which is water. Therefore, you would find that in that space, the entrepreneurs or investors are seeing it as less, profitable. Therefore, government is easy for it to play in that space. I was giving an example with a conversation I had with a friend of mine around the issue of South Africa being being the biggest consumer of ARVs in the world, which in itself, it makes it even more reasonable why South Africa should be able to have a SOE that deals with the pharmaceuticals. Of course, with a view of understanding that it is more about being able to serve, the needs of South Africa. And by the way, I touched on four factors of production, just to recap, which is land, capital, labor, and entrepreneurship. There is a conversation in the academic space where people believe that technology is actually the fifth factor of production, which I disagree with it. Reason being that I believe that within the technology space, there is an issue of capital in there, there is an issue of entrepreneurship in there, there is an issue of labor. So you cannot see it as a separate vertical if you want to discuss the issue of factors of production. But it's very important because we're moving in a technological space. You'll see, if you do your study in Africa, one of the reasons why the countries like Egypt, they are now less than 10% in terms of their unemployment rate, is because they are very efficient in how they use the technology. I mean, out of the 35 new cities that actually the study says is 49, but obviously it includes planned and the ones that are currently building in Egypt, about 38 of them are smart city. And I know in South Africa, we are all excited about what smart city is. And in most cases, we're not even properly defining it, because in South Africa, if a city has smart technology, including your renewables, including your other platforms related to the city, we automatically assume that is a smart city. That's a topic for another day. But nonetheless, the point that I'm trying to raise here is that there are some studies that are actually saying that technology can be part of it can be a fifth sector of production, which I disagree with, because I believe that already by having the four, they are covered in that. Another part which is very important to me, which is very close to my heart, and I think people that work for government will tell you about the CapEx, the application of CapEx as a part of your SOE in terms of economic development. I don't know how much people know about this, but you would know, especially in our country, and I can imagine most developing countries are facing the same situation. You would find that a government, cannot spend money that is being given to them, or government entity, being the SOC or SOE, is given money to spend in terms of its investment to be able to deliver services, and most of them are failing. And until that time you become part of the SOC, you will understand why most companies or most entities are failing. And I'm not in any way promoting that. And I'm going to give you a typical example with the SOE that I headed, which I was the part of the EXCO, as to what really happens, what is at the core of these entities not be able to spend. You'll remember that in South Africa, as far as I can still remember myself, is that the government has, I would say, unwritten policies that says every 1 million rand that has been spent in capital expenditure it should be able to give you a one job opportunity. And think about a company like SAA, for example, that is given 1 billion rand to spend, and they fail to spend. And in the mind of a normal person, you'll think that now, there was a project that people worked and we couldn't pay them. No, that's not the case. In South Africa, the CapEx program is divided into three parts. Part number one is the issue, what we call commitment. Commitment is when a tender goes out and the process happens, like the bidding process, adjudication, and a supplier or a bidder is selected and a contract is signed. That's what we call commitment. In most entities, they actually, when they say, that we met a capex of 5 million rand, you would find that they actually refer to just signing the contract. That's part number one. The second part is what we call the cash flow, which is very, very important in terms of the capex program. What does that mean? It means that for every money that you as a finance person pays to a supplier while they're busy working on a project. Let's say a road from my village, Pokwani village, to Leboafomu is going through a major rebuild, and that's a capex project. Then phase number one is to commit. In other words, the Limpopo Road Agency will sign a contract with Boshielo Consulting to build the road. That's a commitment of that particular money that is put. Number two is the cash flow. Cash flow, it means as I build a part of the road, I'm given money. The most important part is the third point, which is what we call capitalization. The capitalization is very important because what it does, it actually takes the very same road that we built from Pokwani village to Leboafomu, it takes it and put it on the balance sheet of Limpopo Road Agency, which is something that you wouldn't see if the road is not complete. So when you see that a project is not complete in government SOC, it means that project is not a part of the balance sheet of the entity. And of course, I know amongst listeners here, there'll be people that will disagree with me because they will tell you that, as an example, Medupi Power Station in Eskom has at different levels. In other words, as you build the power station, there will be some component of the power station that will be capitalized. That is well understandable. And of course, the reason why it is important for you to understand that a project is only completed when it's capitalized, it actually means that from there we can start withdrawing the maintenance from it. The maintenance, of course, talks about the labor. So in other words, if I am the chief technology officer of ATNS, and we managed to sign a contract with company A to supply us with radar in all South African airports, those radars will only make sense to my balance sheet when I get a certificate from a company that built them to say, Mr. Boshielo, we finished the project, pay us our last money, then I capitalize. By capitalizing, then I know that those radar will have a lifespan of 15 years. So that 15 years, it means that they are going to be maintained for the coming 15 years. Then it gives me an opportunity as the executive of a state-owned entity to be able to put together machineries and to be the resources that will allow me to be able to maintain the network. So, which is very important, Dr. Rakolote, because as I said, when you hear a person saying that, telecom, or, telecom is not a good example, but let's say Eskom couldn't spend money in your book, you would think that no, that actually means that telecom, Eskom is not paying its suppliers. That's a different part, because in most cases, you would find that they mean that the contract were never signed. In other words, the tenders were never prepared, and in other words, bidders were never selected for them to be able to bid for that project. So, and one of the challenges that I've seen, and now I'm just sharing experience with your viewers, because as a person that was in that environment, is that for you to get to a point where a tender document is prepared, people that work in government will tell you, oh, these SOCs, that's not easy. It's not, as a project manager and an engineer by profession, I will tell you that 70% of the project is in the planning. So that planning side of preparing, designing the road, that road from Pokwani village to Leboafomo, be able to spec it properly so that when you send your tender documents out there, you know that you are sending them with the right spec, you know that you are sending them with the right quantity, therefore the good price, the right pricing. That in itself, it takes a long time. It's not an easy work, because people will think that when you get into those entities, now it's easy. I'm Phillip, I'm an engineer, I'm going to get into Eskom, and all of a sudden, Eskom wants me to build a new plant, a new power station somewhere in Messina. Therefore, I'll sit down and draw it and give it to the procurement side and say, please advertise bidding. It doesn't work like that. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of energy to do that. And I'm not in any way saying that when people are failing to do it, it's right. I believe that there's a lot of inefficiencies within our SOCs that makes it very easy for people to get away with it. And again, I'm not trying to put a blame on anyone. Its impact on the economic development in itself is that, by the fact that you're not spending money, automatically it means that people are not getting employed. That's a very important thing. And of course, there are a lot of studies that have been done. I mean, one of the studies will tell you that there is a correlation between the infrastructure and economic growth. So in other words, if a country is not building its infrastructure, it makes life difficult for economic growth. And we know currently in South Africa, we're facing the issue of load shedding. And you know what it does to our economy. In other words, it makes it very difficult for companies to be able to produce. That in itself has a major impact on the economic growth. And it's a very, very simple example. And of course, in terms of economic development, you need to understand that economic development means nothing if jobs are not created. So by affecting the economic growth, you are automatically affecting the economic development. Therefore, you are affecting the employment. Our country, South Africa, it's a very, very painful case study. Every time when you travel the world and be told that you come from South Africa, so some of us that are professionals, we feel the pain of having a country that is leading in terms of, number one, the inequalities, and number two, the issue of unemployment. My biggest question that I've always been asking people that, why are we not using these SOEs to be able to deliver in terms of solving the major problems of South Africa, which one of them, amongst others, is the issue of unemployment. And I believe that we can do that. And I don't even understand why is it a question of when. We have to do it, because every investment that we put on the ground, it's a fact. It has been academically proven that it will lead to job creations. So I'm saying that if you had to think about it holistically, if I'm sitting today here as an advisor to the president, the first question that I'll ask him is that, why is South Africa not investing in infrastructure? And I know people will tell you that we don't have money. No, we do have money. That money that we found ourselves borrowing from the IMF, borrowing it from the World Bank, then using it for consumption. You don't use, a country that is in a development space doesn't use a loan for consumption. You use loan to invest. By investing, you are literally making a way for job creation. I mean, a typical example that I gave is that I remember in our days when I was still an executive in this SOE, was that for every, I mean, I used to tell my team myself, even though I was more on the technology side, but the fact that 95% of the CapEx was under me, I always said to my guys, as they were doing the tender evaluation, I was saying that I am looking for a bidder or a tender or a supplier that will be able to demonstrate that they'll create jobs. If you don't do that, you'll find yourself in a situation whereby your SOCs are focusing on the services. In other words, Eskom will focus on delivering electricity. In other words, Eskom will focus on delivering electricity at all costs without understanding that there is a developmental impact that Eskom has to play in South Africa, amongst others, the issue of job creation. I find it very difficult when I speak to an executive of an SOC that tells me that his company is liquid, he's got money, but they are not investing it. They are not investing in the project that will create jobs. And Tate Rakolote, one of the questions that I used to ask as a part of the conversation that I had with guys during my days when I was still in government was the issue of why are we finding ourselves in a situation where we have SOCs that are not capital intensive. And I was asking that question directly because I knew that I was talking about the issue of job creation. And I know some people will disagree with me and say, no, it's okay for an entity to have 10 administration people. Why? Because it's within the sector that doesn't need the capital. But the question is that we have a government department that are doing a lot of administration for us. You don't, in my book, we don't need to be in a situation where you have an entity that is not used directly. And I know people say, no, but I mean, other entities are used indirectly in developing our economy. Unfortunately, the situation that South Africa finds itself in, it doesn't need the indirect, it needs the direct because we don't have time. We don't have time, and we need to be able to make radical decisions that will be able to move this country forward. I'm going to give you a classical example without having to bore you further. You will know that in China, more than 96% of SOCs, or a country that has more SOCs is China. China has got 90% of SOCs, and followed by the UAE, which is the Emirates, which has about 88%. In other words, the companies that, in the world, if you have to look at the statistics, you'll find that UAE actually has 88%, Russia has 81%, and India has 59%. And let me tell you, these four countries that I've mentioned, what is in common about them is the fact that they have economic growth. I mean, look at the growth that China is facing. Yes, I know China is going through major economic growth challenges, which we all know. And of course, people will give you different reasons as to why China is facing that. But the fact is that the economic, the role that these state entities that is playing in economic development is very huge, and you can't even discount it. A typical example, by the way, I don't know how much you know, as I said, Egypt is building more than 38 new cities, and most of them are built by a government-owned entity called China Construction. I think there's a better name. I'm just know that it's a Chinese construction company. It's a state-owned entity that is building those cities. So the question that you need to ask is that, yes, there will be different schools of thought that says that, no, actually you don't need state entities for you to grow your economy. And I understand where does that conversation come from, especially from people that believe in a capitalist state, whereby they believe that the market has to be free. You have to have a free market where, where factors of productions are used at a free will and without any regulations. Very much understood, but you must remember that South Africa is a developmental state. We are a developing country that you cannot succeed in terms of growing South Africa without the involvement of government at an economic level. It doesn't matter how you think about it. And I'm not in any way trying to preach a radical economic transformation. I'm not trying by all means trying to preach any form of government intervention into the state-owned entity. What I'm trying to say is that when you have a state-owned entities that are properly run, you will find a situation where the economy is growing. And of course, we know it classically, when a country has bad way of running their own state-owned entities, it turned out to be a country that is not growing, or rather it doesn't have a very good framework in terms of growing and developing their own countries. So in principle, that's what I'm trying to cover. And of course, we know it. I mean, as I said, SOEs generally are actually used as a, sort of an indirect form of government intervention in making sure that they provide the issue of safety and security in the country. They also support the issue of public health, education, and of course, in South Africa, we've got the CSIR that are used for research. And we have, a lot of cases where state-owned entities are used for provision of water, sanitation, communication, energy, transport, and other infrastructure projects. And of course, amongst others, you would find that countries like ours are using the government-owned entities as a way of building what I would call a regulatory framework. So in other words, when a government knows that they have a certain direction that they want the economy to take in the form of economic development, they play in there, and then of course, HNS as an example, they will put a framework that says HNS is a monopoly. In Eskom, they will put a moratorium where they say Eskom becomes the main supplier of energy. In conclusion, I'll touch a little bit in terms of the South African picture. And I'm going to apologize with this one because as I said, when I put a disclaimer, I don't want to be seen as a person that is trying to blame the government. I'm not the kind of a person that believes that we need to take that direction, but we need to accept. We need to accept that one of the challenges that South Africa is facing now is failing of SOEs. I mean, I want you to tell me which SOE is not failing. And I know some people say, no, but you can come at the provincial level, at the local level, they are well-run entities. Fair enough, and I understand that. And I'm not in any way saying that South Africa is a broke country, but nonetheless, I believe that our SOEs are failing. And as a part of taking questions, I need us to have a debate as to what needs to be done. And of course, I'll give you my views as to what needs to happen. One of the challenges that we're facing in South Africa, you like it or not, is a poor governance. Most of our SOEs are facing that intentionally or otherwise. I mean, you find a lot of irregularities that are happening. You'll find people not following the PFMA. It's exactly in the issue of poor governance, and in most cases, it's because I believe we're not putting the right people. And I'm not saying that people are stupid. People could be smart, but if you take me as Phillip Boshielo and put me in Transnet as an example, which is a logistic, chances are I might fail. I'm not saying I'm going to fail, but that's just a classic example that I'm trying to show. And another thing that I've seen as I've been reading about the issue of state-owned entities is that I believe our SOCs are not aligned to what I would call economic development trajectory. I mean, a typical example, and all of you will agree, and some of you will disagree with me, that when the ANC government took over South Africa, and somebody will correct me, but I'm not sure if we really looked at the entities that we took from government, and put them into the new South Africa that we wanted. In other words, you look at, I know there were reorganization. Transnet used not to be the Transnet that it is today. But you look at the companies like, Eskom. Eskom was formed many, many years ago in apartheid. It was brought exactly as it was from apartheid into the new dispensation. The question is, was it the right thing? Maybe it was, but in some cases, you find that those SOEs were not meant for a situation like ours, where the economy is saving the majority of people, amongst them being Black and Africans in particular. So I'm just putting it to you out there as a part of the conversation as we move forward. And of course, I am expecting questions out of this presentation. But I need you to understand that those are some of the things that I believe are happening in South Africa. We have a country, like ours. My view is that I would, if I was a president, or if I was advising the president, I would want to have an SOE that focuses on infrastructure. Why I'm doing that is because I believe that there's a correlation between job creation and infrastructure. In other words, your SOEs must be used to solve all the problems that we're having. Unfortunately, the model that we're currently having, which is the model that in most cases was adopted from the apartheid government, is a model that says that an SOC must deliver a service. It doesn't matter how it delivers it. That's the problem that I'm having. I was giving my friends an example with post office. Everybody knew, I remember in my days when I was an executive at Vodacom, I knew 15 years ago that telecom, as a post office is going to face the challenges that they're facing now. What did we do? We literally did nothing. We just ran telecom. A post office like it normal. And I'm not blaming somebody again. I'm just saying that it's a classical example of how by neglecting this issue of economic development strategy, the trajectory, linking it to SOCs, it leads to a situation where literally your SOEs are dying. And in most cases, they are not dying because people are stupid. They might be dying because they are not positioned to do that. I mean, if you ask me today, what is it that you would have done differently from a post office? Probably I would have done the same thing that other guys have done. But there's a question of timing into that. That probably if we reorganized and repositioned post office differently 10 years ago, it would be different today. That's the position that I'm trying to throw in. And as I said, the challenge that we are finding ourselves in South Africa now is that our SOEs are focusing on service. In other words, Rand Hotels is an example, and I hate throwing names, but I'm just going to give you a classical example. Rand Hotels sees itself as a vehicle to deliver water. Doesn't see itself as a vehicle to create jobs. Doesn't see itself as a vehicle to eliminate poverty. You need to be able to position these entities. If you hire me tomorrow as the CEO of Rand Hotels, I must be able to say, in that interview, or tell the board that this is what I'm going to do to make sure that I reduce the unemployment. We need to start asking ourselves, why is South Africa number 3 economy in Africa, which was number 2, I think, a few years ago before Egypt took the number 2 spot? Why are we having the likes of your Egypt that are less or more or less the same equal in terms of economy, but still the unemployment rate is less than 10%. Yes, I know people say no, but Boshielo, you're not being fair, because remember, we come from apartheid. We come from a situation where South African structural economy is different. We've got inequalities. We've got more people that are richer less people that are rich. We've got more people that are poor. I understand that. But that doesn't stop you and I to ask a question of why are we in the situation and what is it that we need to do in moving forward. And as I said, if you don't believe that SOEs are actually a low-hanging fruit in terms of developmental phase, I don't know, then why are you expecting the private sector to be part of that? Because I know some people will say, no, the job of private sector, it's not the job of government to create jobs. It's a job of private sector. And I'll say, look, it depends which side you are standing in, because there are some of these entities that are meant for developmental space, like the likes of your SAE. Hey, we need to still ask ourselves a question that even when we took over SAE from old government, we literally took it as it is, dusted it and threw it into the market. I don't remember any reforms that were done in terms of the SAE. Look at the Dinel. I mean, I'm a former employee of Dinel. Very, very wonderful company, but it finds itself in a situation where it is now. And it might not be that people are stupid that were running it, but it might be that its structure doesn't fit well in terms of the current economic development model, which is the reason why it failed. I mean, when people told me, that the company that I used, a division that I used to work for, which was supporting, amongst others, the Italian military in terms of the developing systems, around their navy, and so on and so forth. It paid me because most of those things that Dinel was developing, they were in need. Countries don't cut their military budgets like they would do in others, because military means a lot. If you look at the likes of your USA, look at the likes of your Russia. Yes, we are going to be told that no, but those countries are involved in wars. We understand that, but military, it has a direct link in what the countries stand for from economic perspective. In other words, you cannot be a powerhouse. You cannot call yourself a powerhouse if you've got a weak military. Look at China. I think, as far as I understand, China are number 2, if not number 3, in terms of their military power, because they want to see themselves as an economic power. And again, I'm not in any way saying that we must go the Chinese route, where literally, 9 out of 10 companies are state-owned entities. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that those entities that we are having, we need to remodel them so that they talk to the current economic development. And we failed, I believe, when we took over this country in 1994 to reassess some of them, their role in terms of developing the country. I cannot imagine a SOC like Eskom focusing mainly on giving us electricity, which is the reason why, by the way, people are talking about the issue of privatizing your likes of your Eskom, because if your job as a CEO of Eskom is to deliver electricity only and not looking at other socio-economic issues or factors or elements, you will find yourself in a situation whereby you think it's okay for Mudubi Power Station to be run by Boshielo Consulting, because what you need, you just need the output power that comes from that power station. I believe there's a very short-sighted. Why? Because South Africa is not in the same space as the likes of the USA. We really need the contribution of these SOCs or SOEs in delivering the issues that we are finding ourselves. I mean, we know it. The current situation is very, very painful, especially, by the way, and I'm not saying it in a bad way, but especially for people like us who are engineers, to see what Eskom is going through, it's very, very painful. And yeah, I'm going to disclose, by the way, that I happen to be one of the people that applied for that role, that is managing Eskom, and I'm not in any way that I would have done different from the current CEO, but probably it would have been different picture. I don't know. It's very, very painful. So in conclusion, yeah, this is what I think this presentation was all about. As I said, this presentation was prompted by literally sitting and looking as a South African, especially a professional. I'm not even an academic, a professional, sitting in my corner and asking myself a question of saying, we are complaining a lot about the issue of unemployment in South Africa. We are complaining a lot about the issue of an economy that is not moving. In other words, it's not growing. And my question is, what is it from the economic perspective that we need to do? And I believe the low-hanging fruit is reworking our SOCs. And I remember last week I read a document coming from Limpopo government where they were talking about one of their most important agency called Limpopo Economic Development that is running on the issues of liquidity. And it reminded me that, when you have entities like those, you need to be able to position them in such a way they can go into the market and be able to get money. It's not always necessary that a government should be the one that bails out these entities. If you run them properly and they've got a balance sheet that can talk by itself, you'll find yourself in a situation where you can go out there in the market and run. And people will say, no, but in the market, it means that you are privatizing the agency. I'm not in any way saying that. I'm going to give you a classical example. When I joined ATNS as one of the executives there, I used to differ a lot with my CFO. I mean, look, I happen to be lucky to have studied my MBL in finance. And I used to ask him, you are having an entity well run and professional. I mean, I believe ATNS is one of the best run entities in South Africa. And I think Comrade Phillip will be very proud to hear it from me. But I mean, the question that I was asking them at that time was that, why is the company not having a debt? I mean, people that did finance will tell you the advantage of having a debt in your company. Your company is not like you, whereby if you don't have a debt, you feel proud that I'm powerful. I can always call up. But companies are different, because by having a debt on your balance sheet, it gives you tax deductible benefits. It gives you all that. And the question that I was even asking him, I was saying to him, I'm coming in as a CTO of this company, and you're giving me this mandate to deploy the capex. You're giving me close to R1 billion to spend so that we can build the infrastructure, so that when people fly in and out of South Africa, they fly very safely. But my worry is that I'm using my own money, while I can my own money with a high interest, while you can go to the market and get a debt that is less than the what we call internal rate of return that comes out of these projects. I mean, people do projects will tell you, especially in my environment where I used to work for, you cannot do a project, you cannot advertise a tender if a project was not properly done and there's no business case around it. And if my business case is telling me that the internal rate of return, that means the interest rate that I get or I lose, the opportunity cost that I lose that are associated to that project is more than 20%. And whereas Investec, which is the bank, can give me a loan at 5%. I don't know why I must use my own money. I can just go and use the Investec money, paid within 5 years, but at least I know that the interest that I am getting out of that project is higher than the one I'm getting from the Investec. What does that mean? It means I'm using Investec to go and make money. So I'm saying that, there are a lot of mechanics that unfortunately, when you appoint Dr. Rakolote in these entities as a CEO, they don't have that mind because of, I think, we tend to focus, which is some of the things that I've seen, we tend to focus on the mandate of that institution. The mandate of ATNS is to control aeroplanes. Then what does that mean? It means if I can build a system that will control the aeroplane so that there won't be an aeroplane that collide on the sky, there won't be aeroplanes that are delayed because the system is not functioning, I'm fine. But unfortunately, when you have an entity like that, you cannot only focus on that. The question is that, what is it that you are doing in terms of the contribution of your entity into the economic development of the country? If you don't have the answer for that, the chances are you have the wrong CEO. You need a CEO that will say, look, I understand we need to replace this radar, but my question is, this project that you're going to run for the coming 5 years, what is it that it does in terms of employing the youth? What is it does in terms of employing the women? What is it does in terms of a Black economic empowerment? If you tick those boxes, then you know it, that yes, as much as those aeroplanes are getting into South Africa and out of South Africa in a safe way, but at the same time, I know I'm contributing in terms of my country in developing it. You are the star. You cannot just be a star that celebrates for audit finding. Being passing the audit and so on and so forth. Very, very important. I mean, if your company get a qualified audit, is a very, very serious thing. But I'm not in any way promoting that companies mustn't be run correctly. I'm saying that as you run them correctly, just understand you have to link them to their role in terms of economic development. In fact, if I had to advise executive committees of these SOCs, I will say that when they discuss their yearly strategies, there must be an agenda, there must be an item on the agenda that talks about the role of that SOC in terms of the development of South Africa. In other words, at any given point in time, those executives must know what is the growth rate South Africa is potentially facing, what is it that they can contribute into that, what is it that, what is the current unemployment rate in South Africa, what is it that they can contribute in terms of reducing that. What is the issue of education in South Africa? What is the issue of entrepreneurship? What is the issue of gender-based violence? So there are so many things that are socio-economic that people like myself who were fortunate to be in those positions, forget about them. You employ me, my focus is to make sure that my body is happy. Why? Because I managed to make money, at the same time I managed to deliver the service. Unfortunately, that's not how I believe these SOCs must be run. I believe that the SOCs must be transformed into a level where they become the part of solving our problems. And that mustn't be political. In other words, it's not a manifesto of a certain political party. What does that mean? It means that even a DA in Cape Town should be able to understand the role of Eskom in Cape Town. It cannot be that you are in Cape Town and you are being told that the intention of the DA in Cape Town, and I'm not trying to criticize DA from political perspective here. I'm just giving you an example that you find a situation whereby the province wants to go off Eskom. Good enough. I mean, obviously they are solving the issue of load shedding, but the question is, how is it linked with Eskom strategy? I just gave an example with Eskom. Let's talk about the issue of trades. I remember they were challenging Comrade Mbalula, the Minister of Transport, in terms of running their own rail system. The question is, their strategy that they want to follow, how does it link to Metro Rail /TRASA? You can name the issue of police, where they want to sort of have their own police force. How is it linked to the strategy of national police? And I know, some people will think that no, but Boshielo, you are trying to be political. I'm not trying to be political. I'm saying that if we want to solve the problems that we're having in South Africa, we need to be able to have a mentality that says each and every, I'm calling it touch point in the country, in our government, has to have a mandate that is related to solving the economic issues that we're having. It's very painful and that Rakolote to be a South African, especially for people like myself that were lucky to work overseas, where you look at the state of South African economy, the state of South African social issues. There are people in South Africa that are going to bed with no food, and you look at it and say, what is it that we are doing ourselves, especially those that are in power in terms of managing this state-owned entities, in terms of solving the issue. The issue of the role of state entities in state-owned entities in economic development is a discussion that we need to have. We need to have forever. We need to have it because if we don't have it, we're going to find ourselves in we will find ourselves in a situation where literally we are discounting very important factors that were supposed to be driving the existence of these SOEs. I mean, you know it. I mean, during the old government, these old SOCs, old government was using them as a part of the economic development. I mean, they had, of course, most of them were saving the few. Of course, SAA had no black customers in there. Of course, Eskom was not delivering power to black people, but nonetheless, they were using them for economic benefit of the country at that time. And I'm not in any way saying that the government of apartheid, which was very brutal and very evil, was very bad, was better than the current government. I think that would be very irresponsible of me to say that. But nonetheless, we need to understand that for every negative situation, there is a positive to read out of it. Apartheid was bad, but nonetheless, some of these SOCs, as much as they were saving the small percentage of our population, but they were well designed to be able to feature into this. I mean, my last statement before I close would be, as I said, if I had to be asked, what is it that we need to do? I think we need to relook at the whole SOEs, because most of them, we took them from apartheid and we didn't even know why they developed them. Of course, maybe we might have known, but they were mandated to deliver on the needs of those people, which were few. But now we're in the new government, we need to look at that. And of course, imagine, I mean, look at Egypt. Egypt has a state-owned entity that is called e-finance, which deals with the payment gateways. China has a state-owned entity that has a social media platform. I'm saying that we are sitting here in South Africa, we don't even think that the world is changing around us. Therefore, that would be, and I'm not in any way saying that we need to take over things that were supposed to be done by private sector. I'm just giving a typical example that as the country moves and changes, we might find ourselves in a situation where we have to really look at how all these state-owned entities are positioned. And I believe, and this is my belief, my personal belief, I believe that we are not getting the best out of them. We are not getting the best out of them, and not because most of them are poorly run, and not because most of them are inefficient. That's a different topic that we can have the other day. But I think most of them are not designed to be able to solve the problems that we are having. I mean, you look at Eskom as an example. If you go to the Eskom's balance sheet, not balance sheet, the income statement, you'll see how much, costs associated to labor. And normally in corporate finance, people will tell you that you need to take that and associate it with, compare it with, out of each and every head that is there, how much are we getting out of them in terms of the return of out of the employees that are employed. So you need to be able to understand that as much as we might be crying that there are so many people that are there, you might find that the problem is actually not the people. You might find that you need to redesign this organization so that it becomes efficient, it becomes relevant, it grows as we are working in solving the issues of the country. And it cannot be correct that 90 to 100% of all the economic development issues that we are facing in South Africa not to be relegated to government. That will be very incorrect. But nonetheless, if you have a situation where the state plays a major role, a central role in making sure that it delivers a very well, sustainable economic development trajectory that will enable, even the private sector to be able to benefit. Let's talk about Transnet. I like giving an example with Transnet because it's a logistic company, and you would know for each and every country that has weak logistics is meant to fail, especially in the modern society where we are moving into the world of commerce. I need to be able to get into my iPad, get into the Transnet website, get a container that needs to move from point A to point B without any hindrance. But if somebody is going to tell me that no, it's impossible because Transnet is not yet at that level, then I'm going to have a problem. So we're not moving fast. And I know there will be a lot of colleagues that will disagree with me. But nonetheless, the information that I gave you is general. I'm not an academic in that space. As I said in my disclaimer that I'm an engineer by profession who happened to had worked for a government entity, a very good government entity called HNS, run by a very, very knowledgeable person. Unfortunately, he passed away. who understood, how to position that company. And of course, we were supporting him as EXCO, just to make sure that the role of HNS is felt amongst the communities that we live in, which South Africa being one of them. So I pushed. It was not easy, but obviously I put the issue of having to know that for each and every 1 million rand that you put in their CapEx program, if a bidder doesn't convert that to one job opportunity, it doesn't cut for me. So I was not only looking at the issue of the BE scores, I was not looking only on the issue of experience, but I was also looking at the socio-economic. Of course, it's very difficult to pass that in the expo when you're busy discussing things like that. But if you really love your country and understand that, these entities can be used to grow our economy, that's the only route. That's the only route. And I'm looking forward as we grow as South Africa to have new, ways of how these state entities are run. Yes, I know there are different school of thoughts, in terms of how they must be run. I know some people are not happy. Probably I'm one of them. Why is Eskom being cut into pieces? Because, it's my view that I don't even know what role will it play. Somebody's wouldn't tell you in terms of, will it create more jobs? Will it make load shedding go away? What is it that those three entities will do that the current one super entity cannot do? And, are we really having a skill that will be moved from all those entities? Is a question. And other people will tell you that maybe it's because it's done by cutting it small, it becomes easy for it to privatize, because if it's a bigger, you'll find yourself in a situation where people pay 51 rand, like they paid for SAA, and the reason being that is indebted. In other words, it's a company that were supposed to be paying me to get it because it's so much indebted. Maybe by just cutting it into pieces, it allows you to be able to say that, look, we can be able to take the debt, put it under distribution, because distribution is what we want to keep as Eskom, but generation, we want to give it away to private sector. Is it a good thing? I don't know. And this conversation that we're having tonight will be able to address some of those things. But in general, a country that fails to use its own entities in developing is deemed to fail. It is going to fail. And I like giving an example. I was lucky to stay in Germany. You look at the likes of your Deutsche Telecoms and the Deutsche Bank. Those used to be SOCs. And when they sold them, they didn't sell them because they were falling apart. They made a conscious decision to privatize them, not because they were falling apart. I mean, when Deutsche Telecoms was sold, it was a monopoly in Germany. It was doing very well, and they sold it because the German politicians at that time believed in a free market society as the powerhouse of Europe. They wanted to be able to have it as private. But those are classical examples as to how these entities can be used and remain part of our history and create jobs. So in conclusion, that is that. And I thank you once again. And I apologize for hijacking you because I just introduced this topic because you wanted somebody to come and speak.
It's okay, my brother.
you wanted somebody to come and speak, and I said, you know what? Let me be the brave enough because this is a topic that has been on my mind.
We must discuss any topic under the sun.
Any
topic under the sun.
Yeah, so any in my book, any topic that talks to solving the issues that we're having in South Africa, I think it's very attractive because it allows us to have a different thinking. And I want people to disagree with me because, as I said, I'm a person that believes in new knowledge. I believe that if people agree with me, that would be very unfair because how do I grow if everyone said, no, Mr. Boshielo, I can't believe on that. I believe people look at me and say, "Hey, Boshielo, you got it wrong. This SOCs must be closed." Yeah.
let's hear from colleagues. There's a question now. Thank you so much, Mr. Boshielo. Let me remind colleagues that Boshielo has got the BSc in Electrical Engineering from University of Cape Town. He has got an honors in Computer Engineering from University of Pretoria. He has got Masters of Business Leadership from Unisa, a Master of Engineering from University of Pretoria. He worked for Eskom, he worked for Vodacom and MTN, and worked for Air Traffic and Navigation Services. So he worked within the areas of the state-owned enterprises. And as a country, if we call ourselves a developmental state, his argument is that we should be a developmental state in theory and in practice. We should not just be throwing rhetorics and saying, no, a developmental state, while we're not doing that in theory and in practice. Colleagues, it's time for you to comment and ask questions. There's a question from Vela P. Tabo Vela, which says, what is your opinion on delineating the political participation in these SOEs versus putting relevant people in running these entities? Will you unapologetically state that the political interference is stifling progress and even economic growth, infrastructure catapulting economic growth? So the issue is that, what is your view of political interference? I don't know if you want to go to that space. What is your view of political interference within the SOEs? And the other question comes from Advocate Commissioner Zipanya Mohalo, who says, do our SOEs take into consideration the formal and informal growth of users? Or are they still using the conservative numbers despite the undocumented users accessing the services? And while you're preparing to respond to the two questions, let me check if other colleagues are ready to comment or ask questions. Please raise your hand. Feel free to make comment or ask questions. I saw in my midst, I don't know if the guys still here. I saw in my midst some guys who are serving in SOECM. I saw some of the guys who are serving in the labor movement, and some of the guys who are serving in the some of the alliance partners. Feel free to ask questions, make comments on this issue of the role of the SOEs in economic development of our country. The argument from Boshielo is that an SOE should be able, over and above providing the services that has been formed to provide, should be able to address the socio-economic issues of the country. That's the argument that Boshielo is putting. If you are an entity responsible to provide roads, over and above developing roads, you should be able to address other social ills. How are you contributing towards the education? How are you contributing towards fighting unemployment and inequalities? How are you contributing toward addressing inequalities? That's the argument around the issue of Boshielo. And he's saying infrastructure has got a major role to play in addressing our current unemployment rate, poverty, and inequalities. That's the summary of what Mr. Boshielo was saying. Any comments, questions before I hand him over to respond to the two questions? You can respond to two questions, Mr. Boshielo. Maybe our colleagues will formulate.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I come from the first one around the political interference. I come from a totally different school of thought. Is that, you know, there's two elements in terms of political interference. Political interference could literally mean deploying people that are aligned to a certain political party, or could the other side, which is the second part, could mean telling people what to do. Both of them, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. In fact, I'm not that kind of a person that believes that you know, when an instruction comes from you know, politics, which has a positive impact on what I do, I must discount it. I'm that kind of a manager that believes that when I speak to you coming from a political office, let's say you're a minister of transport and I work for the Department of Transport, I interpret you as a user. When I say user, I don't mean a user of a service. I mean a stakeholder. I mean a person that benefits out of what I am doing. So to answer the question of political interference is that, you know, I think we've got issues in South Africa where, you know, it faced a lot of abuse, you know, where people were told which tender must be given to who, you know, and which person must be employed by who. That's something that I'm lucky that when I was in government, I rejected that. Yes, I faced that. I mean, don't think that when you are sitting on a budget of R1 billion, you'll never get a call. Somebody tells you what to do with the money. I mean, the issue of you being ethical, the issue of your integrity is very important. I remember the late CEO of MTN used to say to me that, hey, Mr. Boshielo, in your area, you're the only person that was never, found wanting. I never even have a single audit finding in terms of what I was doing. And I'm not because I'm the best person in the world, but once you are ethical and your integrity becomes part of you, it doesn't matter if there's a political interference or not. And I know my brother there is asking, or my brother or my sister is asking a question, you'll think that I'm evading the answer. Yes, there's a political interference in SOEs. It's not even only in South Africa. You go to China, I think is even worse. There will always be there. But you as a person, in most cases, I mean, I've seen a situation where people literally their careers were cut into half because they failed to take a certain instruction. Those are set situations that I think in our space, we shouldn't allow them. We should allow people with integrity to be able to go and say, if my job is to build the roads in Limpopo, it doesn't matter who those projects are given to. But yes, you'll find a situation in our midst where these entities are used for very, very bad reasons. So to answer your questions, yes, there's interference. You'll never, ever, ever avoid. Where there are human beings, there'll always be interference. By the way, there's also interference in private sector. Don't ever be fooled that what you call political interference only happen in private sector. Think about a situation like this. One of the companies that I work for, by the way, they were building the building for a certain unit. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say HR or marketing department wants its own building, and that building is 158 million rand, right? And the rumor has it during my time that, in fact, even the CEO of that entity went all the way to actually choose who must build that, and there were a lot of interference that happened. So let's not put it as at the government level. Where human beings are, there'll always be an interference. But the question is, what do you do yourself as a manager? I mean, I don't think a sober person with integrity wouldn't see if something is not wrong, is not right. I mean, I remember myself, when the late CEO would say to me, hey, man, there's this guy who wants to meet you. He was a former DG of a certain department, wants to meet me. And when I got into that meeting, he said to me, hey, man, I understand there's a 400 million rand worth of a tender that you're about to advertise. And hey, I need us to talk about that. And I told him straight away that, look, let me be honest with you. I don't discuss tenders. And that was my principle. And I've never changed that. Even in the Eskom, one guy actually came to me and say, you are the different executive that work for this entity because you literally distance yourself from this. I don't want to be part of any tender adjudication. That's not me. Because I know where their money is involved, you would find yourself doing things, and I'm not saying you'll be tempted. I'm not the kind of person that will be tempted. I'm saying, I'm just trying to say, you'll end up doing things that you think they're right, and you later on find that they're wrong. Let me give you an example. I meet you in Rakolote, and we discuss a tender, you are beating it. Even though you are not selected by me, you are selected because you are professional and you do your work. Then people remind us that, no, but you guys met 3 days ago before the tender could be awarded. So automatically it pains you in that pain that says that maybe Boshielo gave it to you, and to find that I didn't give it to you. So what I used to do, I used to have what I call a lock-up period. I used to tell my PA that in the coming 20 days, I don't want any meeting with a person that potentially can bid for this project. In fact, even a friend of mine, because I've got a lot of friends in business, I will ask them that, bruh, I don't want us to have a discussion that will compromise you or me, because you might lose a tender because you met me. Because I might be asking myself that, okay, he met me because he knew that he wanted something from me. And even though you didn't get it, then boom, you get it. And people start, no. Rakolote Boshielo, they come from the same district called Raskukune. Therefore, he gave him the tender. So to answer your question, yes, there's a lot of political interference. And as I said, the question is you yourself. You need to be able to know what is it that you need to do. Another question that the second question, which I hope I understood, is the issue of, I'm going to phrase it in my own way. The users, how are the users conscientized towards the service that is being brought? my brother or my sister there, you know, in my area, I was lucky to have two different users. The user of Eskom was a person like you and I. The user of ATNS was aeroplanes, in other words, the airlines. So you can imagine I had two different types of users. One was the airlines, in other words, those were organizations which were represented by an airline organization. In other words, an organization that represents each and every airline that lands in South Africa or depart out of South Africa. So if there was an issue, I would deal directly with the airline. In fact, most of them were part of our design. When we were designing the future network, I mean, I remember one of my first projects when I got into ATNS was to modernize the network. The network was legacy network, that some of it was even used during the apartheid. And I said to my team that you cannot, we are moving into a data space. We need to be able to renew and redevelop. And of course, I can't do that without telling the users. From the Eskom perspective, I think education is important, my brother there or my sister. As the more we find ourselves being educated, and when I say educated, I don't mean the degrees, diplomas. I mean understanding what are our needs, you know, understanding what are our rights. We will find a situation where even Eskom knows that it's actually nonsensical to have a load shedding stage 6. It's not, it's against the constitution. So I'm saying that there will be a situation where the users develop as as we move forward. You know, people will know that, you know, it is my right, you know, to go to the nearest police station and ask for a service. There's no policeman that is doing me a favor when I'm complaining about gender-based violence, right? And unfortunately, many years ago, you would think it's a favor when a policeman or policewoman says to you, no, Boshielo will deal with your case in 3 days, 4 days passes. This time you know it that your rights are there. And I think that's how democracies are maturing. And I'm hoping that this will also help us in making sure that when we move forward, we'll take these SOEs head on. In other words, if an SOE has built a road that is of a bad quality, that is passing my village, I should be able to know that it is within my right to go to a certain office and write a letter and complain so that they can be able to fix that. But you know it. I mean, you find a situation where you walk around our areas and there's sewage running everywhere, and we do nothing. Why? Because we are sort of used that, no, you know, it's not within our rights to complain. Unfortunately, that comes with education, and you will see as the democracy matures, people will start coming back and say, you know what, I'm not going to accept the fact that an aeroplane was delayed by 10 minutes or by an hour, and it's okay for you to reschedule me, because it's nonsensical. So I need to be able to know that this is the mechanisms that I'm going to follow for me to be able to complain, and of course make sure that the very same entity doesn't do the same mistakes. I mean, we know it in South Africa now. I mean, you find political parties complaining about the work that is done by unreiterated at the Eskom, and I don't know what rights we have as South Africans to say that, look, maybe he's the right guy or maybe it's not the right guy. But it talks to exactly what I'm saying, that probably we do have the rights to say, petition, or 10 of us can write to the president and say, President, we believe that Rakolote can actually be the CEO of Eskom and solve the issues that we're having. So that's in summary what I would say, yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Boshielo. Any comments from colleagues who wants to make some comments or ask questions? I don't want to put people on the spot. I want people to be free to make comments and make some inputs. Any comments? Let me admit Mr. Maboe. But with the current challenges that we are facing with some of these SOEs, and the common one is Eskom, because we're directly affected. Other things like Transnet, it takes time for you to realize that I'm affected. Of course, you said it's a logistic company. Sometimes you don't even realize that you are affected when there is no container to deliver your goods from.
Sure.
Yeah. But with Eskom, you see it immediately when they just switch off the light that you are affected.
Yeah. No, I think the issue of Eskom is a very painful one, and I'm hoping that next time we'll have a debate just specifically on that one, because yeah, it doesn't sit well with some of us. I mean, maybe it's because I'm an electrical engineer, an engineer that was trained by Eskom, and I'm asking myself questions as to saying that, are we really going to accept that it's okay to have units that just die? And it seems like they're even rotating. It's dead, they're dead, you know. It's, yeah, I was saying to a friend of mine that, you know, every time when Eskom sends a communique around a unit that failed, some of us already can tell you what is the issue. And you listen to them say it, you will understand that you are being lied for. You are being lied to. Okay. You know, especially when there's an area or a time where there's no load shedding at all, and you are made to believe that everything is okay, to find that they're actually running this generation by diesel. So if a diesel is not delivered, they give us load shedding. To find that some of these units actually are not even working, even when there's no load shedding. And you know, I always say to people,
you are raising very critical issues, and you make us to be so scared, because it might mean that one day or very soon we might go for weeks or months without electricity at all.
You know what's my fear?
Yes,
and I don't want to be quoted, but it's a digital platform. Obviously, somebody will hear it. I believe the worst will happen as soon as the data leaves, because I believe that the damage that is happening currently in Eskom is going to be even more difficult for the next guy to solve. It's a very, very painful, and I'm saying it as a risk manager as well, to say that, you know, as much as we all want the data to go, it might not be a right thing to do, because I believe, and it's just a conspiracy theory, I cannot prove it, but I believe that the damage that is currently happening in Eskom, we are not being told the truth. I think we are told half the truth in most of the time. I believe that if a director had to unpack, you know, it's like that Rakolote, you've got a problem of water leakage at your house, right? Then you fasten it with a plastic. And then people come and say, hey, Rakolote, you must leave that house and you must leave it immediately. Then you remove that plastic. Then the new guy, when he comes in, start realizing that actually these problems are more serious than we thought. That's my fear. The rest, I don't have a problem. The issue of saying that load shedding will be with us forever. My fear is that the current management, eventually they'll leave. I mean, make no mistake. As a former executive of these entities, I know the pressure there. I mean, if Andre sleeps, he might be lying to us. The pressure is so high, eventually the board will pull a plug on him. But unfortunately, the board won't know that automatically by removing him there, that's when you'll see a lot of issues that were not being told. And some of them might be related to his presence in there. And it's a very serious situation. I mean, and I'm not trying to politicize it. I don't know how much you know about what is happening in Eskom. I mean, you will be told that, you know, they called in about 38 engineers from Solidarity, right?
Yes.
You know, they are not telling you that actually, don't say they went and looked for employees who former work for Eskom. No, they look for white employees. It's not, I can tell you I'm a proof. I mean, I sent Andre the Raider my CV myself. I sent it to him. In fact, I was even willing to work for free. And I did that because I was one of the people that applied for his job to become the CEO of that entity. And I was not saying it in a bitter way. I was saying it into saying that, look, some of us are trained system engineers. You know, there's a difference between, you can bring all these young people who are electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, industrial engineers. The biggest issue in Eskom is what we call system engineering. System engineering, people will tell you, they teach you that when one section does something, look at the section before as to what caused this one to happen. So if you don't understand that, you will focus on this one. It's like, you know, if I have a flu, right? If I have a flu, you know, the question would be, before you treat my flu, you might want to know, was I exposed to a virus before and all? So there's a lot of system engineering issues that are happening in Eskom. that I don't think standard derater understand them. And which is what Coco, by the way, I mean, I'm not in any way saying that Coco is a solution. I'm one of the people who believe that Coco is actually not a solution in Eskom. But nonetheless, his systems engineering is very important because he understands that if, for instance, a conveyor belt dies, what would have been the cost of them? You don't just replace it, because that's the reason why one unit comes in and goes. In a week, they put something, then it goes again, because there's no system engineering in there. And what he does, they go out there, look for engineers, past. Then when you look at it, they go solidarity. Solidarity sends all the white males. There's a politics there, and unfortunately, yeah, we are not allowed to talk about these things because some of them might be career limiting. Okay, but that's generally what is all about.
So the question from Velapi is that, do we need these entities?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay, that's the direct answer. That Velapi, we need these entities. Issues of the state-owned enterprise, since it's a global phenomenon, it happens across the whole world. And Dr. Boshielo even gave some stats that even other countries that are doing well economically, they are directly involved in their own state-owned enterprises. He gave an example of China. He gave an example of India and Russia and even the US. So we need state-owned entities.
We
need them more, especially in South Africa. Us who are South Africans coming from the previous regime, we need them more to push the issue of addressing the legacies of the past.
And I can add there, Dr. Rakolote, that 2008, 2009 financial crisis taught us that capitalism doesn't work. Of course, it does, but it's not perfect. You remember USA during that time, they actually parked money into, this what do you call the JP Morgans of these days. They're actually nationalized. In fact, as I'm speaking to you now, Germany is on a big nationalization program. Unfortunately, the media won't tell you that. And I cannot imagine a country like ours that would build a developmental state without the involvement of government. Remember my brother or my sister that asked a question there. South Africa, as things stands, we are in a situation where the inequalities are increasing. And the study has shown that, by the way, I'm going to give an example with a case study that was done in Russia, where Russia tried to privatize. What they found out was that by privatization, it actually meant what we call efficiency in terms of running system and developing the services, but it created more inequalities. Why? Because the new owners of those entities were focusing on their balance sheet. They were not focusing on anything but the balance sheet. They forgot about those socio-economic issues that I told you about. I always say to people that the role of a business is to create value to shareholders. But unfortunately, people are not telling you that value itself is not only in rand and dollars only. There's other things in there. The issue of your impact around your neighborhood. That's why companies, have socio-economic, they've got these social responsibilities that they are busy with, For you to only focus on profit, that will be a problem. Yes, I know your question will say, no, but Mr. Boshielo, even if it's privately owned, you can actually have them participate in those things. The answer is yes, it is, but no, it doesn't. It wouldn't benefit you and I in terms of making sure that the economy becomes what it is. But let me tell you something that people don't know. I don't know how much you guys know about South Africa. South Africa has one of the worst selfish business people that we have ever seen, and they've demonstrated. They have demonstrated it during the days of Jacob Zuma, where they were locking their investments in their balance sheet. I know that the president every year has what he calls investment programs, where companies are committing, which it's very funny because if you don't know, you'll think that the government has raised investment. No, those are not investments. Those are what we call capex commitments. In other words, Vodacom knows that in the coming 5 years, they are going to spend, I think last time I checked, it's close to 5 billion rand renewing their network as the part of the preparation of the 5G network. So those are what we call commitment. In other words, those are the monies that are going to spend. But let me tell you something. There's a time in South Africa, I think the past 10 years, where they locked that investment in their balance sheet. When I did this presentation, I said to you, for every capital investment that you put or capital expenditure that you put is related to job creation. So what does that mean? It means we are in this situation of unemployment because of the private sector. The fact that their balance sheet, and I had an opportunity to work in the office of the COO when I was still an executive at Vodacom. And one of my issues that I always said to him is that, the company is not investing enough. And you would understand why. Probably the shareholders don't want you to invest much. But let me put it to you this way. If I was the president of this country, myself, if you make me the president tomorrow, I can tell you I'm going to build 9 cities in the coming 5 years. What does that mean? It means I'm going to spend on infrastructure. For every city that you build, you must make sure that you connect them through road infrastructure. You must make sure that you connect them through rail infrastructure. You must make sure that actually each and every city has its own airport. Who are going to build those? They are going to be built by South Africans. Chances are they might be managed by, as an example, in Egypt, those 42 cities are built by the Chinese. You know why? Because chances are the investors of those infrastructure might be saying that, look, we need to run a tender, then they chose Chinese because Chinese was cheaper. But chances are the men and women that are on the ground building there are the brothers and sisters from Egypt. So to answer your question, yes, we do need the state-owned entities. In fact, it will be very disappointing that we don't have them. I'm actually very sad that some of them are collapsing in front of our eyes. It's very painful. I mean, think about myself, who comes from aviation. I didn't sleep I don't even sleep today when I see what is happening at Group SA. I'm not sleeping today to tell you that last 3 weeks ago, ATNS, the very same company that I was an executive of, is now asking government for bailout. That's very painful, especially knowing that I was the part of that Eskom. We ran that company like beautifully with no issues. At some stage, we had about 1.5 billion rand in our account. But guess what? They are going to tell us that it's because of COVID, which I think it's a lame and stupid excuse. We've got Prasa, just collapsed right in front of us, right? We've got Dinel, collapsed right in front of us. It's very painful. South Africa without state-owned entities, you're asking for too much.
Okay, the last question or the comment is that this person says, as much as you say the issue at Eskom is systematic problem, but I think we must add that it is also a political problem. What's your view? It's not only just systematic, it's also a political problem. That's something written in the chat box. And I'm sure if you want to go to that space, you can go. If you don't want to go to that space.
No, I will. Of course I will, because that's the reason why we're here. I'll agree with the commentator, the person that commented that, look, you cannot separate politics from the SOEs. Yes, it is political. Make no mistake. Yes, it is political. And when I say the issue of Eskom are systematic, I don't mean as in systems only. I mean, look, the issue of maintenance as an example. If I had to meet Andre Tirade today, I'm going to ask him about the maintenance regime that he's using. He must break it into step by step. What is the maintenance regime that is using? And how long have they using that maintenance regime? If he found it there, did he ever think about reworking it? Because I remember myself, one of the reasons why I believe I did well at ATNS is because that was the first question that I asked when I got in there. I sat down with the engineering team, I sat down with the research and development team, I sat down with the maintenance team, and I said to them, guys, I need each and every you to tell me, what happened when this station goes down? What steps are you taking? Where did you learn that? How long have you been adopting that? What is the time effect? What is the cost effect on that? What is the human resources effect on that? What is it that we can do better? Benchmark that with the world. I mean, I remember when I was at University of Cape Town during our days, we used to be told that France Electricity Date was the best run electrical power generation company. The question is, what kind of maintenance regime are they using? Because remember, France's economy is bigger than South Africa. I wonder if they get load shedding. They do get load shedding, by the way. Remember, guys, let me also educate those that don't know. The reason why you get load shedding is not because there's no power. That's not the reason. You know, you will hear people saying we don't have power in South Africa. No, there's power. You get load shedding because the potentially most of the systems are working at the maximum. You know, in engineering, you're being told that you must always have a certain reserve for in case things go the other direction, then it's got a fallback. So if somebody tells us that there won't be any situation where we find ourselves, you know, systems not failing, you can literally take a risk and switch on the system and have it deliver power to us. But you are taking a very, very big risk, which in most cases is not reversible. I don't know if you remember 3 weeks ago when Nigeria went literally to a total blackout. And some of us as engineers, we knew that it could be the issue of synchronization. In engineering, there's what we call synchronization. What happened is that if you have different systems working together and you switch them off at the same time, for you to be able to come back, they need to synchronize. And for you to do that, there's something that we call frequency learning, and there's a lot of issues that happen, which is where your system engineering comes in. The chances are it might even take you a week to switch on Eskom today if it has to go total blackout. So yes, it's political. I agree with you, fully agree with you. Is it a sabotage? That's nonsense. There's no such thing called sabotage. If there's a bigger sabotage in this country, it cannot be the employees of Eskom. I can tell you straight away, employees of Eskom are hard workers. Of course, there will be rogue units in the system, but I don't believe it when somebody tells me that the current situation that we're finding ourselves in it has the element of sabotage into it. No, that's not true. It's not true. I don't believe in that. What we need to do, we need to actually motivate Eskom employees, give them proper leadership so that they don't find ourselves in a situation where same mistakes have been repeated. Especially from the maintenance perspective. And we don't even know the capex lifespan of these systems, because some of them you might find that they've reached their life, and you can do as much as you do. If a system has reached its life, you'll keep on tripping. But you have to be in Eskom to see that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Boshielo. Let me check if there's any last question. We can take last comment, last question before we close. We have been here for over an hour and 40 minutes. Yeah, that has been very, very engaging. Any colleagues, any comments?
And I hope I've been helpful. Eh?
You have been very helpful, Dr. Boshielo, very helpful. Any comments? Thank you so much, Dr. Boshielo, for your presentation.
Yeah, I think I can give a closing remark from my side.
Yeah, like you said, we need to arrange a session where we can zoom into Eskom only. Just
very much so.
I'll hand over to you for your closing remarks before we close. We are called to a family meeting at 8 o'clock. I don't know what's going to happen, but there's a family meeting.
Yeah, so I once again, I really thank you for this conversation, and I'm hoping that this is the beginning of a bigger conversation to have, and I'm hoping next time we'll be having, the likes of your Fikile Mbalula and everyone, come in here listening, and so that we can hear their views. My brother, one of the biggest challenges that we are finding ourselves in South Africa is the issue of the misalignment between the government and the SOEs. And it will be very nice to hear the ministers. I mean, my brother, MEC was here last week. It will be very, 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 very important for us to hear that gap in itself is the one that is creating the situation that we find ourselves in with all the SOEs, right? So if your government is talking, government's pay, amongst others, is the issue of unemployment and the poverty, right? But you go to these SOEs, that's not their pay. So there's that misalignment that if we had to deal with that, and I want the next job that I'm going to get in government, I want the board to hold me to account in terms of what is my role in dealing with the issues that, are socio-economic, very, very important issues. I used to give an example with guys in Vodacom during our days that, why can't we write a proposal to SARS and say to SARS, we are willing to take 1,000 young people per year, train them and get a tax rebate. Simple things like that. You understand? Simple things like that. I mean, you find a young person with matric sitting at home. Your iPhone, if you had to have your iPhone damaged now and take it to Vodacom, it's fixed by a person with no matric. I mean, sorry, with matric only. So, but you have a person who's sitting at home with matric that can be trained to fix your iPhone. So I'm saying that we're not taking that as an opportunity, and the country, the SOCs must give that, must lead, must be a leader in that. We need to see the strategy of how will this SOCs take people away from the street. We need to see that. I as an engineer, I need to walk into an engineering department and see people filling the whole floor as a call center, like a call center of some type, saying that these are the young people that we are training, because as an entity, Eskom, we made a decision that we're going to train them, right? And then you know what happens, man. I mean, once you train a person, it becomes very important for them, because potentially they might get a new job, the next job, because of the experience they got from Eskom. Now, we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on producing electricity. I don't think that's good for this country, especially with the situation that we find ourselves in now, whereby the country really needs jobs. We need jobs. We're hungry. We're hungry. We're really hungry. And unfortunately, if a government doesn't find innovative ways of creating jobs, we're going to have a problem. I don't see how we won't have revolution in South Africa with the things that are continuing, how things are continuing. And solution is there. We can't take 500 billion rand coming from an IMF. I'm just giving an example, put it on PPEs. We are becoming a consumption society. Let's take those monies that we get from IMF and the World Bank and invest them in projects that will create jobs. I can tell you, in my village where I stay, right in front of my gate, there's no tar road. So if we can put a tar road there, what does that mean, right? It means jobs. So already are there. I mean, I was even giving an example with some guys that in Limpopo, as an example, most of the water come from the Boshielo dam there next to my village there. The question is, why are we not building pipelines and reservoirs just around the fact that there's water there? Then by doing that, it's a capex environment, therefore you're creating jobs. So simple things like that. Or people will tell you, but we don't have budget. Of course, we don't have budget. Then why can't you get an entity that you'll use as a way to go and create liquidity? In other words, get people out there to come and invest in the country. We want to see our ministers going to Dubai, because there's a conference around infrastructure, telling investors that no, we are not privatizing our country, but we believe that there are projects that you can invest in our country. Because when you invest in a project, it means that it could be that we pay you out after 10 years, right? So it's not like you're taking over the entity. Because I'm a person that believes that privatization of these entities can take us a long way, but I don't think South Africa is there. We know that Egypt is moving in the lines of privatizing their entities, but they are there. They've already spent. I mean, look what Egypt is doing now. They are building a new capital city right about 45 kilometers from Cairo. Right, that city is already 80% complete. So they are building new cities. Our government hasn't even built a new city. Instead, we're building malls. Right, we're building malls, and we say, okay, build cities. We can build cities, build the railway lines, build them. Even these IPPs, if I was the CEO of Eskom, I wouldn't even invest in them. I would have a division that deals with renewable energy, right? So in conclusion, that's that. And I really thank you for those that listened. And I know sometimes people like me, because we talk under general, we are not academics, we might find ourselves not being honest with the truth, but nonetheless, that's the reason why we have conversations like this, so that you can correct us as we move forward. But I really thank you, Dr. Rakolote. I was really looking forward to this conversation. And I
thank you so much. We thank you for availing yourself and participating. And we're looking forward for you to participate in the next conversation that we're going to have. Thank you so much.
I will. As long as I get invited, definitely I will, because I'm a kind of a person that loves learning from other people. You